The mines of Carthan 9 were never silent. They breathed with metal sounds and machine roars that never ended. In those deep tunnels, light was a rare friend. Every worker knew the smell of dust, heat, and sweat. Among them was a young alien woman named Lyra. Her skin carried a pale glow under the dim lights, her eyes tired but still alive with something stubborn. She had been working for 40 straight hours, swinging her small tool against the hard mineral wall, trying to meet the impossible quota. Every hour, her body begged for rest, but she kept going. Around her, hundreds of others did the same, all different species, all tired, all quiet. The mining corporation didn't care who they were, only how much they produced. They were just numbers on a report. Lyra had stopped counting the hours long ago. She had learned to move like a machine. Her back hurt so much that she couldn't stand straight. The air was thin and heavy with dust. Every breath burned her chest. But the thought of stopping made her think of the guards, of punishment, and that pushed her to keep swinging. Her friend Jor, an older miner, had warned her that working beyond 40 hours could make her faint. "Rest before you break," he told her softly before his shift ended. But Lyra only smiled weakly. "If I rest, they will dock my rations again," she said. Food was always short. The company took half their pay in deductions for air, water, and shelter. The rest barely kept them alive. Her hands were bleeding, small cuts hidden under the dust. The lights flickered again, a sign that the oxygen level was dropping. She tried to reach for her mask's control valve, but her fingers shook too much. The machine beside her rattled like it was about to explode, but she was too tired to step back. Her mind started to drift. She remembered her home before the company took her family's land. She remembered the blue rivers of her world, the wind that smelled of trees, not dust. Her little brother's laugh came back to her for a second, and then the sound was gone, replaced by the loud echo of drills. She wanted to cry, but there was no water left in her eyes. Her lamp dimmed to a weak orange. "Just a little more," she whispered to herself. "Just a little more and I'll rest." But her body refused. Her arms dropped and the tool clanged against the floor. She fell to her knees, gasping for air that wasn't there. Around her, no one noticed. Everyone was too busy trying to survive their own hours. She tried to crawl toward the exit tunnel, but her legs didn't move. Her heart pounded painfully. The sound of the machines faded, replaced by the slow hum in her ears. Everything around her blurred, and she lay down beside the tunnel wall. The cold rock pressed against her face. "I just want to sleep," she whispered. Her voice cracked. The tunnel lights blinked once more, and then everything went dark. For a long time, there was only silence. When a faint sound returned, footsteps echoing through the empty shoe. "Easy now," he said softly. "You've been overworked. Don't move." She blinked, still unsure if he was real. "You human?" she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Last time I checked," he said, adjusting her oxygen gauge. "Name's Eli. I'm here to inspect the lower tunnels. Seems I found more than a broken drill." His voice had a warmth she didn't expect. Lyra wanted to ask why he was helping her, but exhaustion closed her eyes again. Eli lifted her carefully, setting her against a stable beam. He scanned the area, shaking his head. 40 hours straight. No wonder she dropped. He looked around at the endless tunnels inside. The air filters were failing, the lights unstable. He had seen many mining colonies, but this one felt like a graveyard. As he checked her vitals once more, Lyra whispered something he barely caught. "Don't leave me," Eli paused. He smiled again, though she couldn't see it. "I won't," he said quietly. "You've done more than enough work for one lifetime." The machines above them rumbled, sending dust raining down from the ceiling. He tightened his grip on his tool bag and looked into the darkness beyond. Somewhere far off, a warning siren started to wail. But for now, his focus stayed on the alien girl who had pushed herself past every limit. He adjusted her air tank again, making sure it wouldn't fail. She looked fragile, but there was strength in her even in sleep. Eli wondered what kind of courage it took to keep going for 40 hours in a place like this. Humans were known for endurance, but maybe they weren't the only ones who refused to break. In that dim tunnel, where machines screamed and dust fell like snow, a strange moment of quiet humanity, and something more, began. When Lyra woke again, the air smelled different. It was still dusty, but he had been working hard too. He was human, but not like the ones she had heard stories about. Company humans were usually arrogant, giving orders from above the tunnels. This one worked with his own hands, sweating and breathing the same bad air as the miners. "Why did you help me?" she asked after a long pause. He looked at her then, his gray eyes steady. "Because you were dying," he said simply. "And because I don't like seeing good people treated like machines." His words confused her. "Good people?" she repeated. "You don't even know me." Eli shrugged lightly. "I don't need to know you to see what's wrong. You're just trying to survive like everyone else down here." Lyra lowered her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not as a worker, not as a tool, but as someone real. She rubbed her wrists where the mining scanner bracelets left marks. "We don't have a choice," she whispered. "If we stop working, they cut our rations." "I know," Eli said softly. "That's why I came here. The system's broken. I volunteered for this inspection because I wanted to see it with my own eyes." She looked surprised. "You volunteered to come here? To this place?" He nodded. "Most people on the upper levels pretend the mining colonies are fine. They only see the numbers, not the faces behind them. I needed to see what those numbers mean." Lyra didn't understand at first. It seemed strange that someone would come willingly to this hellish place. "You're different," she said quietly. Eli chuckled. "That's what people tell me." He finished repairing the small air unit and tested it. A clean stream of cool air flowed through the vents. He smiled at her expression. "Better?" She nodded, feeling the fresh air fill her lungs. It felt almost like freedom. For a while they sat in silence. Outside, the tunnels groaned with the weight of machinery. Occasionally the ground trembled slightly, a reminder that collapse was always a danger. Eli didn't seem bothered. He checked his scanner and frowned. "The oxygen levels in the lower shafts are dropping fast. If the miners stay down there much longer, they won't make it." Lyra's heart tightened. "My friend Jor is still down there," she said quickly. He was finishing his shift. Eli glanced at her. "We'll find him." She hesitated. "You can't go down again." "It's not safe," he gave her a calm look. "Neither is leaving people behind." He stood up, adjusted his helmet, and handed her a small water pouch. "Drink, you'll need strength. We might have to move soon." As he spoke, Lyra noticed something glowing faintly on his wrist, a small device showing heartbeat signals and oxygen readings. There was also a human emblem etched into his suit, Earth Volunteer Corps. She had heard whispers about them, a group of humans who helped colonies abandoned by corporations. She never believed they were real until now. "You really came here to help," she said softly. Eli looked at her and smiled. "Someone has to." Something stirred inside her, a small spark of hope she thought was gone. She drank the water slowly, watching him gather tools and check his communicator. There was no signal. They were too deep. Still, he didn't seem worried. Suddenly, the floor shook hard. Dust fell from the ceiling. A distant alarm echoed through the tunnels. Lyra grabbed the wall to stay steady. "That was close," she said, breathing fast. Eli scanned the area. Section 12 just collapsed. "That's near the main shaft." He looked at her. "We have to move now." Her body was weak, but she forced herself to stand. He offered his arm to help her, and she didn't refuse. Together they left the small room, stepping back into the long, dim tunnel. The flickering lights painted their shadows on the walls. The air was thicker here, full of tension. Every sound and every crack, every distant echo, and made her heart race. But walking beside Eli gave her strange comfort. He moved with quiet confidence, scanning ahead for danger. As they reached the end of the corridor, Lyra noticed something she hadn't seen in years. A faint outline of old company signs that said emergency exit, restricted access. Eli smiled when he saw it. "If we can reach that shaft, it might take us closer to the upper levels," he said. Lyra's eyes widened. "No one uses those paths anymore. They were sealed before I was born. Then it's time to open them again," Eli replied. She couldn't help but laugh softly. His voice carried something she couldn't name. Not just bravery, but belief. The kind that made impossible things feel close. They kept walking side by side, deeper into the half-forgotten tunnels. The lights flickered above them, and for the first time in years, Lyra felt like she wasn't just walking through darkness. She was walking toward something brighter. The tunnel stretched endlessly ahead, narrow and damp, filled with dust that glowed faintly under their helmet lights. Lyra moved slowly beside Eli, her legs still weak but her spirit stronger than before. Each step felt heavy, but she didn't want to fall behind. The air was colder here, and drops of water echoed softly from the ceiling. Eli walked in front, holding a small scanner that beeped every few seconds. "The emergency shaft should be close," he said, his voice steady through the comms. "If we're lucky, it might still connect to the surface vents." "Lucky," Lyra repeated softly. She had forgotten what luck felt like. They passed old machines half buried in dust, forgotten loaders, cracked pipes, and broken warning lights. It was clear no one had been here for years. Lyra ran her hand over one of the metal walls, feeling the rough marks left by miners long gone. "My people used to say the mines remember those who never came back," she whispered. Eli slowed his pace and looked back at her. "Then let's make sure they remember the ones who did," he said, giving a small grin. She smiled faintly. His optimism was strange but comforting. Most workers down here didn't talk about hope. They only talked about surviving the next shift. But this human carried something different, something that made her want to believe again. After an hour of walking, they reached a sealed door. It was covered with layers of dust and rust. The faded sign above it read, "Emergency Passage B12. Lyra's eyes widened. "It's real," she said quietly. "I thought these were just stories." Eli knelt by the panel, pulling out his toolkit. "Stories usually start from truth," he replied, connecting a wire to the control unit. Sparks flashed briefly. The door didn't move. He frowned and tried again. Lyra watched him work. His hands were firm, careful. Each movement showed experience, not just from training, but from years of fixing things others had given up on. "You fix machines like they're alive," she said softly. He glanced at her. "In a way they are. Everything's got a bit of life if you treat it like it matters." Her chest tightened at that. No one had ever spoken with such simple kindness before. She looked down, suddenly shy. "You're strange, human," she said. "Good strange, I hope," he replied with a grin. Before she could answer, the door gave a loud hiss. Metal scraped against stone as it slowly opened a few inches. A gust of cooler air rushed through the gap. Eli stepped back and smiled. "Well, that's progress." Lyra covered her mouth as the air touched her face. It smelled faintly of rain, something she hadn't felt in years. Her eyes watered. "I forgot what clean air smells like." Eli looked at her gently. "Let's get you more of it." They squeezed through the half-open door into a wider chamber. Old lights lined the ceiling, some flickering weakly as Eli powered them with a spare battery pack. The room glowed in soft yellow light. In the corner stood a broken transport cart, and beside it, a small water pipe still dripping steadily. Lyra hurried toward it, cupping her hands to catch the drops. The water was cool and real. She laughed softly, her voice full of surprise. Eli watched her, smiling quietly. "Feels good, doesn't it?" She nodded, wiping her face. "It feels like the world still remembers us." For a few moments they just sat in the quiet, breathing the fresher air. The silence was peaceful. Unlike the constant noise of the active mines, Eli used the time to fix his scanner and check the oxygen readings again. The numbers weren't good. The lower levels were collapsing faster than expected. He looked up at her. "Lyra, how many people are still down there?" Her face fell. "Hundreds. Maybe more. The company doesn't let us track shifts anymore. They say it's not our concern." Eli clenched his jaw. "It should be everyone's concern." He turned the scanner toward the lower tunnels. "If that oxygen system fails completely, they'll all suffocate." Lyra's heart pounded. "We can warn them, right? There must be a comm line." He shook his head. "Not from here. But if we reach the upper vents, I can send a distress signal to my ship. It has a stronger transmitter." "Your ship?" she asked, surprised. "You have one?" "Docked 2 kilometers east of the surface ridge," he said. "I came down through the Ain." They walked through another tunnel, smaller but more stable. The air was thinner, but it felt lighter somehow, like hope was sneaking in through the cracks. As they turned a corner, a sudden noise echoed ahead. A faint metallic screech, then silence. Lyra froze. "Did you hear that?" Eli nodded slowly. "Someone's down there." He raised his lamp higher. In the distance, 2 glowing eyes blinked. Not human, not mechanical, but frightened. A young miner stumbled out of the shadows, coughing hard. Lyra ran forward. "Jor!" she cried. The old alien worker nearly collapsed when he saw her. "Lyra, you're alive," he said weakly. His eyes turned toward Eli, confused. "A human? What?" Eli caught him before he fell. "Easy," he said. "We're getting out. Can you walk?" Jor nodded slowly. "Barely. The tunnels." They're closing. You're almost near the upper vents, she tried to believe him. The air was getting thinner and her breathing grew harder with each minute. She glanced at Jor, whose old lungs were struggling. He tried to hide it, but she could see the pain on his face. Hold on, Jor, she whispered. We're getting out soon. Jor smiled faintly. You always say that, little one, he said. Maybe this time it'll be true. Eli stopped suddenly. His scanner beeped louder. He crouched and examined the rocky floor. Wait, he said. The readings here are unstable. There's a gas pocket below us. One wrong step and the tunnel could blow. Lyra froze. So what do we do? Eli studied the wall beside them. We go around, he said finally. He pointed to a narrow side shaft, almost hidden behind fallen stones. It looked small, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. Lyra frowned. That way? It's tight, Eli admitted. But safer. He started clearing the rocks with careful hands, moving slowly to avoid any spark. Lyra helped him, passing stones back one by one while Jor sat nearby catching his breath. The work was slow and exhausting. Sweat ran down their faces even in the cold air. Lyra's hands were sore, but she refused to stop. She had seen Eli work for hours without complaint. Somehow that made her want to keep going too. After almost half an hour, they cleared enough space to crawl through. Eli went first, his lamp lighting the narrow way. The sound of rock shifting echoed behind him. Follow my voice, he said. Lyra helped Jor through the gap, then crawled after them. The passage was rough and sharp, scraping against their suits. The air smelled of rust and old metal. For a while, there was only silence except for their slow breathing. Then a deep cracking sound filled the tunnel. The ground trembled violently. Lyra screamed as dust rained down. A section of the ceiling broke off near her legs. Eli turned quickly and grabbed her arm. Keep moving, he shouted. Jor was already halfway through when another rumble shook the walls. Lyra's heart raced as the tunnel behind her collapsed completely. The sound was deafening. When it stopped, she realized they were trapped, but still alive. Eli turned his headlamp around, scanning the space ahead. The narrow shaft opened into a larger cavern, dimly lit by old energy tubes along the walls. The air was thicker but breathable. We're clear, he said, helping Lyra to her feet. She stared at him, still shaking. You saved me again, Eli smiled faintly. We save each other down here. Jor laughed weakly. If I keep following you two, I might live forever. For the first time in days, Lyra laughed too, a quiet, broken laugh that still carried warmth. They rested for a few minutes beside an old pipe. Eli checked his scanner again. The signal was weak, but it showed an upward path from the cavern's far side. That's our route, he said. But we have to hurry. The oxygen level is dropping fast, Lyra nodded. Her muscles ached, yet she felt a strange new energy. Fear was still there, but now it walked beside hope. She looked at Eli, wondering what kind of man risked his life for people he didn't even know. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly as they walked. You could have stayed safe above ground. Eli looked ahead, his voice calm. Because I used to work in mines too. On Mars, years ago. Different world, same greed. People died while others watched. I promised myself I'd never stand by again. Lyra's eyes softened. His words stayed with her. She could see it in his eyes. He wasn't a hero from stories, just a man who decided to care. They climbed higher through the winding shaft. The air became slightly cooler, and the faint hum of surface machines could be heard above. Suddenly, Eli stopped again. Hold, he said, raising his hand. A faint vibration shook the ground. What now? Jor whispered. Eli's face tightened. A drill. Automatic systems reactivated after the collapse. If it breaks through here, we're done. They listened. The deep roar of heavy machinery echoed closer. Lyra's heart pounded. Can we shut it down? Eli checked the scanner. Maybe. The control unit should be in the next chamber. Stay close, they hurried forward. The next room was brighter. Old panels glowed weakly, and a massive control console stood in the center, covered in dust. Eli ran to it, connecting his handheld device. Come on, come on, he muttered, tapping the screen. The machine roared louder above them. The ground shook violently. Lyra and Jor held onto a support beam as dust fell like rain. Eli, she cried. It's coming. He pressed one final command, and the noise suddenly stopped. The silence that followed felt endless. Eli let out a long breath. System override complete, he said. We're safe. For now. Lyra smiled in relief, but her legs trembled. She almost fell, and Eli caught her. His grip was firm, his eyes gentle. "You did well," he said softly. "So did you," she whispered. Jor chuckled tiredly. "You two talk like the mine's already over." Eli smiled at that. "Not yet," he said. "But we're close." He looked up at the ceiling where the faint sound of wind filtered through cracks. "I think the surface is near." Lyra followed his gaze. For the first time, she believed it too. After all the darkness and fear, the thought of sunlight didn't seem impossible anymore. They gathered their strength and prepared for the final climb, unaware that something even greater waited above, something that would change everything they knew about humans, freedom and hope. The tunnel grew narrower as they climbed. Their lamps flickered weakly, shadows stretching and trembling across the rough walls. Each step upward felt heavier than the last, but something stronger than fear kept them moving. The pull of the open sky they hadn't seen in years. Eli led the way, checking the scanner every few minutes. "We're less than 100 meters from the surface," he said quietly. His voice carried calm determination. "Once we reach the vent shaft, we can breathe real air again." Lyra smiled faintly, her face streaked with dust. "Real air," she repeated softly as if testing the words. Jor coughed behind them but gave a small laugh. "I'll believe it when I taste it." They kept climbing until the tunnel ended at a large metal hatch. The thick bolts were sealed with rust and faint light leaked through the cracks. Lyra touched it gently, feeling the vibration of the world above. "We're close," she whispered. Eli inspected the hatch and frowned. "Pressure lock's damaged." "We can't open it with bare hands, then how?" Jor asked weakly. Eli looked around. His eyes landed on an old service panel partly buried under debris. He brushed the dust away, revealing a faded logo, the same mining corporation that owned everything here. "If I can reroute power through this," he said, "we might be able to force it open." Lyra watched him kneel beside the panel, tools in hand. His fingers moved fast, connecting wires and testing circuits. Sparks jumped, lighting his determined face. He worked with quiet focus, as if the noise of the collapsing world didn't exist. She sat near Jor, trying to stay calm. Her heart wouldn't stop racing. Every sound above, every echo of metal, made her think the company guards would appear, or worse, that the tunnel would crumble again. She looked at Eli, wondering what drove him to keep helping them when he could have saved himself. After several minutes, Eli stood and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "All right," he said. "When I count to 3, we pull this lever together. The power surge will release the lock. Be ready. The air pressure might be rough." Lyra nodded and took her position beside him. Jor leaned against the wall, ready to assist if needed. 1, 2, 3. They pulled the lever down. A loud hiss filled the chamber, followed by a heavy clang. The hatch trembled violently, and then with a groaning sound it burst open. A blast of cold, fresh wind rushed in, filling the room with clean air. Lyra gasped, covering her mouth in disbelief. Above them was the night sky, dark blue and endless, sprinkled with stars. For a moment all three stood still, staring upward as if afraid it might vanish. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She had imagined the sky so many times, but nothing matched the real thing. Eli smiled softly, watching her expression. "Told you we'd make it," he said. Lyra turned to him, her voice trembling. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Jor laughed weakly, stepping into the open. "I never thought I'd see this again." His old eyes glistened under the starlight. They climbed out one by one. The surface stretched before them, a wide ridge covered in pale dust and metal ruins. In the distance, the company towers blinked with red lights. Beyond them, far on the horizon, faint lights from distant settlements shimmered like fireflies. Eli checked his wrist device. The signal bar glowed green. "We're in range," he said. "I can contact my ship." He opened the communicator and spoke into it. "This is Ward. Mission priority, emergency extraction and medevac for surviving miners." Coordinates uploaded. Static filled the air, then a clear reply. "Copy that, Eli. Rescue craft en route." "ETA 8 minutes." Lyra stared at him. "Rescue craft?" He nodded. "They'll take us to a safe colony. You'll finally be free." The word free hit her heart like a spark. She had dreamed of it every night, but now that it was real, she couldn't believe it. Her voice shook. "What about the others down there?" "The ones still trapped?" Eli turned toward the mine entrance. His face hardened. "We'll get them too," Lyra frowned. "But the tunnels, they're collapsing. It's suicide to go back." He met her gaze calmly. Maybe. But leaving them isn't an option. For a moment, silence hung between them, filled only by the soft sound of the wind. Lyra's chest tightened. You would go back? After everything? Eli smiled faintly. Humans have a saying, nobody gets left behind. Her throat tightened. The courage in his words made her eyes burn. Then I'm coming with you, she said firmly. Jor coughed. You're both crazy, he said, shaking his head. But maybe that's what it takes to change things. Eli grinned at the old miner. You coming too? Jor sighed and smiled. If I stay here, I'll just get bored. Eli looked at both of them, the exhausted alien girl and the old worker, and something in his heart stirred. This wasn't just about a rescue anymore. It was about something bigger, something worth fighting for. He adjusted his gear and pointed back toward the open hatch. The ship will land soon. When it does, we'll load supplies, then go back down. We'll make a path for the rest. Lyra nodded firmly. We'll save them all. They waited on the ridge as the wind swept through the rocks. A few minutes later, the sky flashed with blue light. A sleek rescue craft descended through the clouds, its engines humming softly. The sight made Lyra's heart jump. Eli stepped forward as the ramp opened. 2 human medics came out carrying stretchers and oxygen tanks. They saluted Eli quickly before rushing to help Jor. Lyra stood beside Eli, her eyes wide with awe. You really called them for us, she whispered. Eli looked at her, his expression gentle. You earned it. The air smelled like freedom and rain as the engines cooled. The first dawn light began to rise beyond the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold. Lyra turned her face toward it, closing her eyes. After years underground, she finally felt alive. But her heart knew one thing, this wasn't the end. Eli was already planning to go back into the darkness to bring others out. And she would follow no matter the danger. Because now she understood what hope looked like. It looked human. The morning light painted the rocky ridge in pale gold as Eli prepared to go back into the mines. The rescue ship rested quietly behind them, its engines cooling after landing. The medics had already treated Jor and several other miners who had climbed out through nearby vents. For the first time in years, the air around Carthan 9 smelled clean, but Eli's eyes were not on the horizon. They were fixed on the dark hole below. The shaft gaped open like a wound, still breathing dust. Lyra stood beside him, her face half hidden by a borrowed oxygen mask. She looked stronger now, her eyes clearer, her posture steady. You really mean to go back down there? She said softly. Eli checked the power cells on his scanner. We started something, Lyra, he said. And I'm not leaving until everyone trapped below has a chance to see this sky. She nodded slowly. Then I'm coming with you. He turned to her, ready to argue, but the determination in her eyes stopped him. There was no fear left in her, only purpose. All right, he said finally. But we do this carefully. No hero work. We get them out together. Jor limped over, leaning on a medic's arm. You'll need a guide, he said. The lower shafts twist like a maze. I still remember most of them. Eli smiled faintly. You're not staying here, are you? Jor laughed, coughing lightly. Resting is for people with no stories left to tell. The 3 of them gathered supplies from the rescue craft, portable oxygen tanks, light sticks, and small mapping drones. As they geared up, one of the human medics called out, You've already done enough, Eli. The command center's sending more teams tomorrow. Eli shook his head. Tomorrow will be too late. The medic hesitated, then saluted. Then come back alive. Eli gave a small nod and stepped toward the entrance. The wind blew across his suit as he looked once more at the sunrise. Let's bring them home, he said quietly. Lyra followed him down the shaft ladder, her heart pounding. The warmth of the surface faded quickly, replaced by the cold breath of the deep tunnels. Lights flickered along the walls, revealing the familiar gray stone and metallic ribs of the mine. The deeper they went, the more it felt like the planet itself was holding its breath. After almost an hour of climbing, they reached the main chamber again, the same place where Lyra had first collapsed days before. It looked worse now. Broken machines lay scattered, pipes hissing with thin streams of air. The silence felt heavy. Eli launched a small drone that hovered ahead, scanning the tunnels. A faint signal blinked on his wrist display. They're in life signs, he said. About 20 workers still trapped beyond the south corridor. That's near the gas pocket, Jor said with worry. If we break the wrong wall, it'll ignite, Eli nodded. Then we go slow. They followed the signal carefully, stepping over debris and twisted metal. The smell of burnt oil mixed with dust. Every few minutes, Lyra stopped to listen. Sometimes she thought she heard voices, sometimes only echoes. Finally, a weak cry reached their ears. "Help, over here!" Lyra ran forward, her lamp cutting through the dark. Behind a half-collapsed wall, a small group of alien miners were huddled together. Their faces lit up when they saw her. "Lyra, you're alive," one of them cried. "We're getting you out," she said quickly. "Stay back while we clear the path." Eli set his tool bag down and started cutting through the metal supports with a plasma saw. The sparks glowed briefly like tiny stars in the darkness. Lyra and Jor helped move the broken stones as carefully as they could. When the last piece fell away, the trapped workers stumbled out, coughing and crying. Eli handed them oxygen masks. "Breathe slowly," he said. "Follow the lights, and there's a vent shaft ahead. You'll see the sky soon." One of the miners looked at him in disbelief. "A human is helping us?" Lyra smiled. "He's the reason we're all still alive." The worker bowed his head. "Then maybe not all humans forgot us." Eli didn't answer. He was already checking his scanner again. "There are still more signals deeper in," he said. "We'll guide this group to the surface first, then come back for the rest." They moved as one team now, humans and aliens together. The once silent tunnels filled with voices again. Not of fear, but of hope. Some carried wounded companions. Others shared their oxygen tanks. Every step upward felt lighter. Halfway up the corridor, the ground trembled again. A low roar echoed from the far end. "Another collapse!" Jor shouted. Eli pushed the group forward. "Keep moving," he said. "Stay to the left wall." Rocks rained down and a cloud of dust swallowed the light. Lyra grabbed a young miner's arm and pulled him clear just before a beam crashed behind them. When the noise stopped, they coughed and looked around. Everyone was still alive. The tunnel behind was sealed, but the way ahead remained open. Eli's suit was covered in dust, but he smiled. "Looks like the mine's trying to keep us," he said, half joking. Lyra wiped her face. "It can try," she said. "But we're not staying." They kept climbing. After another long hour, the faint hum of the surface wind reached their ears. A line of light appeared ahead, the opening of the same vent they had used before. The rescued miners gasped when they saw it. "Go," Eli said, helping the first one up. "The ship's waiting." One by one, they climbed out, blinking against the daylight. The rescue crew on the ridge ran to help them. The sound of human and alien voices mixed in the air, filled with relief and disbelief. Eli came out last, his uniform torn, his face tired but proud. Lyra helped him stand as he took a deep breath of the open air. Around them, miners cheered and hugged each other. Jor looked at the sky and smiled. "For the first time," he said, "this world feels alive again." Eli glanced at the crowd of survivors. "We did it," he said quietly. Lyra looked at him, her voice soft. "No, you did it. You showed us what freedom looks like." Eli shook his head gently. "Freedom belongs to everyone who still believes in it." As the rescue ship prepared to lift the survivors to safety, the sun broke fully over the horizon, shining on the ridge and the people standing there, human and alien side by side. For the first time, the planet of Carthan 9 saw a morning that didn't belong to the company. It belonged to the free. Days passed since the rescue. The mines of Carthan 9 were silent for the first time in decades. The heavy machines that once ruled the planet now stood still under the morning sun. The workers who had lived their lives in darkness were finally breathing the open air, their eyes still learning how to look at the sky without fear. Lyra stood on the ridge where it had all begun. The wind brushed through her short silver hair as she looked down at the valley. Tents and shelters dotted the ground below, full of miners and medics. The rescue ships had come back again and again, carrying the wounded to safety and bringing food, blankets, and light. She could still hear the laughter of children who had never seen daylight before. For them, the world above wasn't a dream anymore. It was real. Eli walked up the rocky path toward her, his steps slow but steady. His arm was wrapped in a bandage from the last collapse, but he didn't complain. He stopped beside her and followed her gaze toward the horizon. "It's strange," she said softly. "All my life I thought the surface was just a story. Now it's home." Eli smiled faintly. "It's amazing how big the world feels once you step out of the dark." Lyra looked at him and asked quietly, What happens now? He thought for a moment before answering. The company will pull out. Too much attention on them now. The volunteer corps will help build a new settlement here. A place run by the people, not by contracts. Her eyes brightened. You mean, we'll be free? Eli nodded. Truly free. The word felt heavy and wonderful in her heart. She had said it before, but this time it meant something real. Below them, workers were busy repairing old machines, not to dig, but to build. Some turned mining equipment into power generators. Others laid out foundations for greenhouses. The same tunnels that once trapped them would soon carry clean air and water instead of dust and despair. Jor sat near one of the tents, telling stories to a group of children. His voice carried across the ridge. Once upon a time, he said, we worked for those who thought we were less than them. But then a human came, a quiet one with dust on his boots, and he showed us the courage doesn't come from power. It comes from the heart. The children listened with wide eyes, and Lyra smiled. He's telling stories again. Eli chuckled softly. He's better at it than me. She turned to him. You don't see it, do you? You changed everything here. Eli shook his head. I didn't do it alone. You kept going when everyone else gave up. You believed when no one asked you to. That's what made this possible. For a while they stood in silence, watching the sun climb higher. The wind carried the smell of clean soil, something Lyra never thought she would smell again. In the distance, a new flag fluttered on a tall pole built from old mining beams. It bore no company logo, only a single symbol, a star rising over a pair of hands, one human and one alien. Lyra pointed to it. That's yours, she said. Eli smiled softly. No, that's ours. The sound of an approaching ship broke the quiet. A sleek silver transport descended near the camp. The crew waved from the ramp as they began unloading supplies. One of them shouted, Captain Ward commands requesting your report. Eli sighed. Duty never ends. Lyra looked down, a small sadness crossing her face. You're leaving soon? He hesitated. For a while. There are other colonies like this one, places that need help. But I'll come back, she smiled faintly. You always keep your word. Eli looked at her, his voice gentle. And you? What will you do now? Lyra gazed toward the camp. I'll stay. These people need someone who remembers what it was like down there. I'll help build the new colony. Maybe start a school. Teach the children what freedom really means. He nodded approvingly. That's a good mission. The two stood there, the wind carrying quiet peace between them. The world no longer roared with drills or commands, only with life. When the sun began to set, the sky turned shades of orange and violet. Lyra turned to him once more. Before you go, tell me something, she said. Why did you risk everything for us? Eli looked at the horizon. Because someone once risked everything for me, he said simply. When I was young, I worked in a Martian mine. A man saved me from a collapse. He told me to live for something better. I promised I would help others do the same. Guess I finally kept that promise. Lyra's eyes softened. Then maybe your promise became ours too. Eli smiled. That's how hope works. It spreads. He started walking toward the ship. The setting sun reflected off his suit, making him look almost golden. Lyra watched him go, her heart both heavy and light. As the engines roared to life, he turned and raised a hand in farewell. Keep the lights burning, Lyra, he called out. Don't let them go dark again. She waved back, smiling through tears. I won't. Not ever. The ship lifted into the sky, climbing higher until it became a bright point among the stars. The crowd below cheered as it vanished into the clouds. Lyra stood alone on the ridge, the wind brushing against her face. She looked at the miners working, the children laughing, the flag waving under the starlit sky, and she whispered softly, He didn't just save us, he gave us back the sky. That night, the new colony of Carthan 9 lit its first beacon, a tall tower shining bright enough to be seen from orbit. It was built from the same metal that once chained them. Now it stood as a promise. In the years to come, travelers would speak of a planet once buried in darkness, where an exhausted worker and a human engineer changed history together. They would say humanity didn't just bring machines or laws. They brought something rarer. They brought hope. And that hope burned forever in the hearts of those who had once lived beneath the ground.